everybody. Please take your seats. This evening's performance is about to begin. I could get a job doing that, I think, at the theatre. Sorry, I'm still checking my lists of people who said they were coming and are not here and wanted a reading slot but haven't turned up and all that sort of stuff. But thank you, everybody who is here. For the last, sounds about right, of, it feels like the end of the year to me because I've got kids. So it's it feels like the end of the year. It's not the end of the year. The end of the school year, term ends next week. So thanks for coming. It's been very quiet the last few weeks at the Writers' Workshop because I think people who don't have kids are all on holiday. So it's nice to see you. Often, it sounds about right, what we do is we have a guest and I interview them a little bit and they perform a little bit and then we have a break and an open mic. And sometimes we do it the other way around, and tonight we're doing it the other way around because tonight our guest is Carmel Page, who is here. Woo! And Carmel is a storyteller, and we just felt like ending with a story feels like a nice way to end to me. So we're going to do the open mic first. One of the things I'm really keen on doing with this space is inviting different kinds of writers who write in different kinds of genres and different kinds of styles, because I always feel like writers are a bit siloed into kind of novelists, page poets, performance poets, script writers, and they don't mix very much. And I think we're all storytellers, we're all writers, and it's great just to hear all the variety of writing that people can bring. So we're going to begin with the open mic. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm Beverley, and I run the Writers' Workshop, which is upstairs in Orchard Square. We have a wide range of workshops that are on, every week, every month. We try and provide everything a writer needs. We can't do it all, but we try, and we're building all the time. And this is Mamie. Wave, Mamie. Woo! Mamie is our membership coordinator, so if you do have thoughts about things that you would like to see or how we can improve things, Mamie would love to hear them, and so would I. But often I'm a bit distracted. So we're going to get started with the open mic. Excuse me looking at my phone, I'm just looking for my list of people. And I just also have to tell people, because people keep asking, I'm known for wearing silly frocks at these dues, and because I've done so many now, I've run out of frocks. And today I was thinking, I need a new frock for this thing tonight. And I went down Ecclesall Road looking at the fancy frocks, and I didn't like any of them, and I gave up. And then I live in Nether Edge. I thought, I'll just pop in the charity shop. And I found this bargain dress, which is in the Writers' Workshop branding colours. So I'm feeling very smug this evening. It cost me £15, and I like it. So let's see, who shall we have first? I haven't asked anybody if they want to go first. Shall I ask? Anybody want to go first? Otherwise, I'm going to just pluck a name. Oh, Jude's here. Annie, go first. Hooray!
Now, this is a short story called Bard of Steel City. Pamela Godbehere strides past the stainless steel water cascade that heralds Sheffield train station. She's meeting Linda and Suzanne from her book group. They're going on an outing to the Hepworth Gallery in Wakefield, and will have a discussion on the way about their latest read. It was her choice. Stuart, A Life Backwards, the biography of a troubled homeless man by Alexander Masters. Pam, recently retired from social work, has a spring in her step and is feeling good in her floaty fair trade dress with bare feet slipped into comfy Birkenstocks. In contrast to her breezy appearance, just behind swaggers Tony. His sweaty feet stuck in battered trainers without laces or socks. Grey marl tracky bottoms too big for his skinny frame and short for his long legs. In a faded hoodie with "I don't give a F ... in rubbery white letters emblazoned across the front. The NT from don't partially scratched off to make a do, as if he does actually give a fuck. A shock of jet black hair frames his haggard face. Tony doesn't feel breezy today, Living on his wits is hard on the body. He scrabbles in the bin, retrieves half a panini, stuffs it into his mouth, turns and sidles into step with Pam, who has slowed and is waving to her travel companions further down the platform. Linda and Suzanne look up and are surprised to see Tony walking forward together with the animated Pam, as if they are a couple, an odd-looking couple. When they converge, Tony introduces himself enthusiastically. I'm Tony DePaul of Homeless Hall, poet on call, bard of Steel City. My, ladies, you do look pretty. A wonderful day, wouldn't you say? Some spare change would pay my way and pave your way to a charitable day. As he speaks, Pam listens, head on one side, maintaining eye contact with Tony, while her friends squirm and shuffle. She smiles at his audacity and says kindly, before you continue, Tony, I wish you well, but I don't give money in the street. Pam volunteers with Help Us Help, a campaign support group for the street sleepers of Sheffield, who have a rule of no giving money in the street. Money, he bellows, as spittle and bits of panini fly from his lips. You think it's for money when I offer free poetry? Free as the air we breathe, free to you from me, this poetry. The Steel City bard feigns offence. Linda gazes around embarrassed while Suzanne fiddles in her bag for her purse. Pam gives them a steely stare with a warning shake of her head and repeats calmly, now, Tony, I did say I don't give money in the street, and neither do my friends, but we thank you for the free poetry. She turns away as Tony, the man of words, stands his ground and offers more. Why not give money in the street to poets like me who bleat out words for you to hold? It's entrepreneurial, it's bold. My words to you will stick in your mind. A reciprocal gift keeps my belly lined, for I am poor, you lot are not. Tony proffers his grimy hand. Pam takes it and shakes. He grips hard. Excuse the grubbiness and dirt. I washed in a puddle this morning. No opportunity for more hygienic grooming. Pam feels a surge of compassion, tempted momentarily to breach the Help Us Help, no money in the street rule. But Tony keeps her hand in a tight, slimy clench and glares into her face alarmingly. The compassionate surge recedes, ebbs away as on an outgoing tide. A strong wave of irritation flows in to replace it. He clings on like a drowning man. His vice-like grip on both her hand and her day harden her resolve. Enough is enough. Linda and Suzanne mumble to each other. It's obvious they want her to bung him a few quid to get rid, to pay him not for his poetry but for his departure. His grip is sweaty. Her hand slides out now, free to pay him, but she does not, will not. His moment of opportunity missed as her window of weakness closes. He invades her personal space, gives her bad poetry with bad breath, stands like an unwelcome hawker on her doorstep selling dusters of which she has many, along with ironing board covers that never fit. Both stubborn, their slam wrestling poetry match reaches deadlock. Of course, the stakes are much higher for him. With respect, Tony, once again, I don't give money in the street, but I do wish you well. The poet on call's manner changes. He screeches directly into Pam's face as she dodges bullets of flying panini. Why not give money, Mrs. Tighty? I could be the Son of God or Jesus. Would you refuse them? Effing Jesus and God Almighty? Pam Godby here is an atheist, but she thinks if she were a believer, it could well be true. He could be Jesus, the prophet, the Son of God, saviour of the homeless, the dispossessed, the destitute. He could well be today's Jesus. But she rallies and responds with the sarcasm of a heretic. If you are the Son of God and Jesus, then I wish you both well. Tony thinks he should have targeted the dithering friend Suzanne. He roars, you don't wish me well or you'd help me through this hell. Nowhere to live, nothing to eat. What's spare change to you could be a feast for me. And my wife died last week, you bitch. Pam remains resolute. She concedes it is possible that his wife has died, which is indeed very sad, but on balance, she thinks it unlikely. Surely, if that were the case, a poem, as the grieving, bereaved husband, would have been his opening gambit, a sure money spinner. The train arrives with the women bored, trying to avoid him. Tony follows, prowling the carriage, offering poems for change. He revisits them as the train slows at Meadow Hall. I am poor, not even a cup of tea for me, he drones. You ladies are rich, but I can give you this one for free. With that, he farts and then darts from the train, leaving a stench so pungent that it permeates the carriage and leaves a lingering blemish on the rest of their day out. The Steel City Bard has left his calling card. That's it.
Brilliant. Oh, it's gone a bit low now. Who shall we have next? I think maybe Irina. Yeah, Irina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Irina. Is this okay? I don't know, this music is... Oof. So I'm working on this creative nonfiction piece that's kind of experimental, kind of not experimental. The experimental part is going fine, but the storytelling is a little bit difficult for me. So this is a storytelling piece. I thought this would give me motivation, and it did. A ladder between the worlds. Once upon a time, there lived a Natasha, a 20-something hopeful feeling out her options in the depths of a crumbling country. Like many others, she searched for a way out through an online dating service. Unlike most, she found it. Importantly also, unlike the many Natashas, Nadezhdas, and Anastasias surfing the waves of international love, she was not a mere performance delivered by one of the young men making a living where they could, whom my high school friends would later go on to date. This Natasha was real. Fortune smiled upon her. Like a colonial woman, plain and tall, traveling to the prairies for the sake of a widowed stranger, our Natasha traveled to America in search of love. Love was made. Matrimony ensued. Unto Natasha and the stranger, a child was born. But just like that, the story fell back apart. The stranger was arrested for dealing in stolen TVs. Natasha was left alone in the unforgiving heat of a southern summer, and she might have been lost or might have become a triumphant single mother entrepreneur, but instead she got saved. A local church had learned of her predicament. In an act of blinding generosity, the church purchased tickets back home for her and her baby and dispatched a man to help her travel back. This man had never traveled to our lands, did not speak any of our languages, had not flown in a plane for years, had in fact a phobia of planes, but had something much more important than all these things. He had the Lord. The Lord, having removed his fear of flying and endowed him with unshakable confidence, this man flew through the air and burst through the shell of our universe. Upon their return to Mari land, Natasha and her baby moved into a new apartment building, where they became neighbors with the family of one of my upwardly aspiring classmates. It's at this point that I enter the story. The man, with the Lord's blessing shining bright on his brow, started visiting our city every year. I met him at school, where he arrived bearing glossy, updated textbooks. He'd chat to students in the language we were all learning, which he spoke so well. He flashed his teeth at us, filled up our classrooms with his tall, stocky frame. He invited us all over to my friend's apartment, where he was staying. The apartment was modern, high ceilings, nice, smooth floors. I liked being there. The meetings, house church I learned to call it, were ceremonial and dignified, not at all shouty or chaotic. English language Bibles were given away in hardback. Contents of Bible chapters were summarized. Grape juice and crackers were passed around. Afterwards, when all was over, people would talk and joke. My friend and her family, the relatives and neighbors, the teachers at the school, everyone around this man confirmed that all of this was all right. I attended the meetings, of course. I was brought up to expect the best of foreigners. As the proverbial last pagans of Europe, my family had welcomed many an ethnographer in our little dorm room. At 12, I was reading everything I could find about philosophy and world religions, so I asked the right questions about the Bible. I can see now that I made an impression, enough of an impression for me to be included in the select few who would get baptized. My friend's family organized a trip out onto the lake for this purpose. I received my white t-shirt and got dunked in the water, and it was done. We celebrated. The man's drawl resounded across the lake's surface, filling the forest with a new glamour. Once established, the passageway between our worlds widened with every season. More guests trickled in. The man's wife, his children, a rotating cast of teenagers sponsored by the church. Anything the Americans touched ceased to be dingy. Before long, some of us were being invited to travel to the promised land ourselves. Kids would come back tanned, proud in frumpy t-shirts. The fits may have been bad, but the cotton was always thick, and the names of distant states and cities spelled correctly. These were no knockoffs. The trips were the real thing. I could not expect to go, but perhaps some part of me had been waiting for my turn, because when they asked, I did go. I said yes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Irina. For his first visit to Sounds About Right, could we have Roger? Roger? Yeah? Are you ready? Give him a big round of applause.
Good evening. Good evening. I've got hearing aids and I didn't hear you. Good evening. Yeah, there you go. Good night. I write poetry. I'm not going to bore you what it's about, really, because you'll not be interested. Right, I'll start with this one. It's in the pamphlet. My CNA years, they call the pamphlet. I'll show you. So I'm not lying. There you go. They are for sale. You can put money in charity box. Ain't got a problem. The pervy things we do for love. I've been drinking again. This time it's your bathwater. Last night, while you were watching your soaps and just before University Challenge, I was on my second glass. Remembering Oil and Kenny, who once said he would pay a whole £1 just to hear you take a leak. I said then, as I do now, don't be offended. He once asked Emmylou Harris, he'd pay her £1.50 to listen to her have a bowel movement. Apparently, that was way above the going rate. So you get the idea. You know? This one is only a neighbourly thing. My neighbour sometimes pots round for sexual favours. She now says my old house stinks of bacon, fat and fags. It's beginning to seep through the walls. I had a thought about going meat-free 1 or 2 days a week. I also thought about popping round to hers and wooing her with my plug-in Febreze. Thank you, thank you. This one is Sweet Smell of Failure. She asked if I could smell urine, and when did I last change my underpants? I didn't think these were topics we'd cover on our first date, but I told her it was 2 weeks since I'd changed my underwear, and now they are nice and warm but damp. With this, she made her exit. I followed 1 or 2 pints later. I walked home in the rain. The only bus I saw displayed not in service. The driver waved. I took care to look nonchalant. I don't write nature poems. I leave that to David Attenborough and all his gang, you know what I mean? And I don't watch nature programs because I saw one other week and there were all these whales going ganging up on this little seal. And I thought that were bullying, not, you know what I mean? We watch it first. I turned it off. This one's called The Oncoming. From the hillside, we hear the ploughman talking to his horse. He answers the horse's questions. The horse asks about the oncoming evening and what will it be like, because this field has been a nightmare to plough. I'll be glad to put my hooves up. How about you, ploughman? What are you looking forward to? The ploughman says, a tractor, and kills the conversation stone dead. These aren't in the pamphlet you can gather because I've got them. A day in the life of an avid collector. I've found some of your toenail clippings under the bed in the spare back bedroom. It's 4 months since you left, and I thought I'd have a tidy. I put them in an empty box of Swan Vesta matches and placed them with your post office savings account book. That's also got nothing in. Am I all right, Beverley, for time? Two more quick. I don't write long ones. I don't know enough words. I come from Sheffield. They keep me out of school at 15. I haven't got a chip on my shoulder at all. They told me about Beethoven while Dylan were making Blonde on Blonde and Beatles were making Sgt. Pepper. Could never understand that. What did I want to know about the deaf Austrian? Is he Austrian, Beethoven? And they did all this. Anyway. And I couldn't sing from my diaphragm. What was that about? I'm a Foxillian. A day in the life of a man about town. I'm wearing the shorts I got from Cotton Traders. They're in a nice cerise pink. I paired them with a plum-coloured t-shirt I bought online. Women of a certain age are sitting up and beginning to take notice. As I purchase a vegan sausage roll and pay contactless, I feel like I'm a man about town. As I unchange my e-bike and check my tyres and finger the saddle, hope it doesn't play havoc with my hemorrhoids. Last one. I like finishing with this one because I think it sums up my poetry, to be honest with you. It's called Dirty Talk. While discussing my future love life with a woman I met down at the Coin Laundrette, she told me she wasn't interested in marriage or a sex life or poetry that spouts from broken settees. I asked her if she liked washing. She said that was out too. I knew then she wouldn't like my backside as I stood up. I wondered if she'd follow me to my departure. I doubt it. I'm not to everybody's taste. Thank you very much for having me. Hope to see you again sometime.
It is a good bag. Thank you, Roger. Next, let's go to Joe, if that's okay. Round of applause for Joe.
Hi everybody, a bit of my first time, that sounds about right, so I've chosen 3 short poems about relationships really. I'll do the first 2 are a little bit more cynical than the last one, so I'll get them over and done with. And the first one is called Surprises, and it was inspired by the fact that last year I asked my husband to surprise me for my birthday. He did it the best he could. And I realized on reflection that I'd given him an impossible task. So, an interesting observation of oneself arises from surprises. I'm not a fan. For when I say surprise me, I mean disguise and hide me from the effort that's required to do the thinking and arranging to uncover what I want. When I say surprise me, I mean provide me with the exact representation of my imagination. When I say surprise me, I mean mesmerize me with plans in perfect order, shape and size that match the very color of my eyes. Intoxicate my brain. Don't refrain to bring each desire residing deep within, each whim. Not tea, gin. Not red, white. Not 4 hours on a flight. Not silver shining, matte. Not this, that. Not chocolates, flowers. Not seconds, hours. Not maybe, yes. But I must confess, to be blunt, you'll fail because you're male. I was very tempted to change the last line to because I'm female, because I realise I'm not just having a pop at them. This one is called Fantasies of Me and You, and it's quite extreme because it sort of picks up on the kind of expectations that we might have of an intimate other. And although it is quite extreme, I think there's a little bit of this in everybody's relationship. Fantasies of me and you. Running on the inside of me is the deer, the majestic bear, the stallion of shining white. Flying on the inside of me is the eagle, the swift, the swallow, and the lark in upward flight. Swimming on the inside of me is the whale, the dolphin, the stingray, midst a choir, all pictures of desire, all images of fire, all fantasies of me and you. Running on the outside of me is the rat, the spider, and the snake, the reflection of mistake. Flying on the outside of me is the vulture and the carrion display of what went wrong today. Swimming on the outside of me, cold fish who never see or feel or talk, but fit the dish of dead dreams, the can of what might have been, the silver salver of despair. Sorry. Something a bit lighter now. So this is one that I dedicate to my husband, and it's called Jobs Around the Home. My husband has his uses when it comes to jobs around the home. He doesn't wait to be asked or do them because I moan. And neither has he ever used that patronizing line, "I've done the washing for you, dear," as if all the jobs are mine. No, he chooses his own chores to do and asks for no reward. Like emptying the dishwasher and sweeping up the yard. He keeps the garden birds all fed by filling up their tray. He irons every shirt he owns, and he walks the dog each day. But the job I love to see him do that really makes me grin is shoveling all the dog shit off the lawn into the bin. His faithful dedication should never be ignored, for shoveling shit is hard to do when the rain has poured and poured. And I gasp in admiration as he moves with ninja style to place his giant trainers between, not on, each doggy pile. And it really makes me giggle as he stoops beside the rows and wrestles with no hands to spare the itch upon his nose. Some women marvel at their men for competitions won. They fill a shelf with trophies just to prove what they have done. But if there were awards for doing jobs around the home, my husband would be first for all the efforts he has shown, and no shelf or trophy cabinet could ever be approved to hold the weight of all the shit my husband has removed.
Thank you, Joe. That was wonderful. James, would you like to come up? Also, your first time here, I think, for us, yeah?
Okay, I'll be reading from my short story, City Evenings in a Brothel Near Bristol. Part 2. Innocence is a precious gift of childhood, and when it is lost, nothing in the world can bring it back. A child was to be born in the brothel on Sampson Street. The brothel usually ran like clockwork, but today the whole schedule was thrown off because one of the girls, Valia, was going into labor. The spinster who ran the brothel was hurrying back and forth, upstairs to check on the bedrooms and downstairs to calm the long line of men who were getting increasingly impatient and angry by the second. All of the bedrooms were empty except for Valia's. All of the girls were crammed into this one room where Valia lay in bed, screaming and crying in pain. There was no doctor to administer pain relief, so she had to endure it all naturally. The pain was indescribable, and Valia cursed whoever had impregnated her and trapped her in this cruel situation. Of course, it was impossible to say who had impregnated Valia, but once the baby was born, it would become clear. She hoped it would be somebody wealthy, like a banker or a lawyer, so she could escape from her sad, pitiless life in the brothel. But even then, there was no guarantee the child would be accepted by him. Most of the men who visited the brothel were married and had families of their own. Another child born by a prostitute would only complicate matters for them at home. They might even take the child and leave her to rot in the brothel forever. All of these thoughts raced through her mind as she prepared to give birth. 3 girls gathered around Valia. Sasha was holding one hand, Emily the other, while Miranda was offering some reassuring words. Miranda called herself a witch because she practiced black magic and had a face like a cauldron and hair like a mop. She was certain that the baby would be a girl. This prediction seemed to please Valia very much because she stopped screaming and couldn't help but break into a smile. A young girl can earn more than twice as much as an adult in the brothel, and Valia thought that soon she could save enough money to buy her freedom. But she was even more pleased by what the witch would say next. She went on to say that Valia's daughter, Elizabeth, as they had already named her, would marry a very rich man, and all of their worries would be over. Valia was so pleased to imagine her future with money that she started to sing loudly, that she caught the attention of the spinster downstairs. When the old hag opened Valia's bedroom door and found the 3 girls sat around the bed with pregnant Valia singing loudly, she shouted, which gave Valia such a fright that the baby's head flew out in one short burst. The baby looked around the drably furnished room, first at the 3 half-naked girls, then at the old hag, before letting out such a cry that only a newborn can make. Valia immediately recognized the baby's eyes. They were dark blue and resembled a handsome young man who wore black whiskers and a flat cap. Valia didn't know his name, but she had a vague recollection that he was a city worker, a banker perhaps. She was so excited by this, she didn't even notice that the witch's prediction was false. The baby was a boy. The other girls left the room bitter and disappointed that the baby was not a girl and that their miserable fate was sealed. Valia waited for the young banker to return. Months passed by like this. Valia would hide her baby under her bed whenever a man came in, feed him from her breast when he left, and rock him to sleep in her arms, thinking about her new life with the banker until she too fell asleep. It was not yet night, but the street lamps had turned on, the moon and the stars shined bright blue, and everywhere people were rushing to begin their evening commitments. Over there in Temple Meads train station, with bright shining blue eyes, is none other than Nicholas Clark stepping off a train, with his briefcase and flat cap in hand. It is not usual for a civil servant to wear a flat cap, but Nicholas's parents were poor working-class souls, and he liked to wear the cap to stay in touch with his roots. All of the money and success he received had not changed him, but only revealed his kind and gentle spirit. He gave 1/10 of his earnings to charity and often volunteered at a local community centre. Sometimes his colleagues, jealous of his kindness, would tease him by saying, "Nicholas looks like he works in a factory." But he always remained cheerful and never took the teasing too seriously. After work, Nicholas, like many men who work in the city, wanted to spend the evening in female company. Their gentle affection was the perfect antidote to the stress and boredom of working in an office all day. He felt like Hylas, lured by the delicate water nymphs to a hidden world underwater from which men never return. He entered the brothel without any trace of guilt, seeing it as an expression of good health and virility and not something to be ashamed of. He smiled at the spinster, who took his coat and flat cap and led him up to Valia's room. There was a great deal of excitement and talking about the young man already. "Did you see his eyes? As blue as the ocean." "I knew the father of the baby boy would arrive today," said Miranda proudly. "What do you think he will say when he finds out?" asked Sasha. "He will deny it, of course. I can read people very easily, and I can tell he's a very selfish person with no interest or incentive to help her out." The three girls grinned from ear to ear and seemed genuinely happy at Valia's misfortune. The spinster entered Valia's room first, spoke with her for a few minutes, then left and gave Nicholas a sympathetic smile before returning to the other men downstairs. Nicholas entered the room. Valia was waiting for him inside. She was dressed head to toe in clothing, a long dress, plimsolls, very unusual in a brothel. Her hair was tied up, and she wore a necklace with a crucifix made of brass. Nicholas sat in a chair, and instead of getting undressed, which is typical in a brothel, Valia sat next to him. They sat there in silence for a while, until the baby started crying. Valia got down onto her knees and pulled the baby out from under the bed. A brothel is no place for a baby, thought Nicholas, and then he recognized the eyes, and a look of astonishment came across his face. "It is true," said Valia, wrapping her baby in her arms. "The baby is ours." Nicholas wanted to say something, but every time he tried to speak, he couldn't find the right words. "He was born about 3 months ago. His name is Eli." "Eli," Nicholas repeated to himself. "Yes, and he's very well behaved. I want to raise him with you." "Here? No, not here, you fool. I want to marry you and be a mother to our son." Nicholas could not believe that only a moment ago he was a happy and carefree bachelor, and now he was getting married to a prostitute with his baby. He grabbed the door handle when suddenly she grabbed his arm and yelled, "If you leave me now, I will tell everyone that you raped me." Valia, desperate as she was completely unaware of how ludicrous her threat sounded. Nevertheless, Nicholas, being of gentle and timid disposition, was completely unprepared for the threat and the consequences of it, so he fell for it, letting go of the handle and sitting down on the chair again. The life had drained from his face as he buried his head in his hands. Valia moved over to the door to stand in his way should he try to escape. Nicholas saw an open window and bolted straight for it as his only way out. He leapt out of the window and lay dead on the pavement below.
Thank you, James. Penny, are you reading a story? I'm thinking we might go to a poem, that's all. So, Luke, do you want to come up? Big round of applause for Luke, also his first time here. Woo!
I've never done this before, so it's the first time. I write poems about inequality, the importance of aspiration, and having hard conversations. And the first poem's called If an Addict Had a Contract, and it's just to open your eyes into the world of addiction and people who struggle with recovery, and that if they had a contract, the contract wouldn't get signed in the first place. So this is just a little bit of insight into the world of addiction. It's not everything, but it's just a little bit for you, okay? And it goes like this. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, shivering, sweating, voices rushing through my head telling me all sorts of crazy stuff, thinking to myself, I never signed up for this. I remember taking the long way around the estate just to escape the fate of a dealer of figs, thinking to myself, I never signed up for this. I remember when I was a chop lad. I remember when everyone wanted to know my name. And now, for some apparent reason, everybody likes to kick me while I'm down. And I'm thinking to myself, I never signed up for this. And this is a poem, it's called Everyday Struggles and Your Postcode Wars. I lived in London growing up, and in the South London area, and I used to venture off to Vauxhall and Brixton, and that's where all my family lived, and they're all together. And we moved up years ago from London, and I've lived in South Yorkshire the longest. And I was watching a film called Boy Blue, and everything just came back to me. The life that we were living, the things we were surrounded by. Like, you walk down the road and you've got to worry about gangs and crime, and if you've got no role models, it's a hard place to be. And I just wanted to write a poem just to show some empathy and some expression for the inequalities of the world, living in the urban areas, the ghettos like Sheffield, various different places, and the harsh realities of what can be. Okay, and it goes like this. Everyday struggles in your postcode wars. My brother Timmy has to go to school today. There's always a possibility he might not make it home. That's why I look no further than today and take my life one day at a time. I pray to God my brother Timmy makes it home today. My brother Timmy has to go to school today. There's always a possibility he might not make it home. Unfortunately, the kids around my way need to be careful of gangs and crime, thanks to the postcode wars. I pray to God my family don't need to bury another loved one. My brother Timmy has to go to school today. There's always a possibility he might not make it home. And I ain't joking, I'm sick and tired of visiting burials and overthinking the consequences of my loved ones, and the lasting effects of these postcode wars. I pray to God he'll put an end to knife crime, guns and violence, and help these ghetto youths aspire to make our communities better for me, you, and everyone. And that's all I've got to say about that one. Sorry about the dynamics. There's one more poem. I weren't going to say this tonight, but I feel like it's okay to say this. And it's called No One to Talk To. And like I said before, kids in ghettos and all around us, they grow up in broken homes, they have no role models. So you go down the road and your role models are the ones in the parks, and they're holding weapons, and that's all you've got to look forward to, unfortunately, until somebody comes along and switch on the right light bulbs. And it's called No One to Talk To. And it goes like this. Every child needs a role model. Every child needs a father figure, a little inspiration. I walked down the street to play games in the park, swords, 9mm, blades. They weren't scared to use them. No one to talk to, no man to man. So we turned to the gangsters and gun dealers for a little bit of love and togetherness. Every child needs a role model. Every child needs a father figure, a little inspiration. I go to school to get an education, knowing full well anything could happen if I don't keep it shut. I'll end up in a body bag. No one to talk to, no man to man. So we turn to the gangsters and gun dealers for a little bit of love and togetherness. Every child needs a role model. Every child needs a father figure, a little inspiration. I go to the local estate knowing full well if I know too much, I could end up with a price tag on my name. No one to talk to, no man to man. So we turn to the gangsters and gun dealers for a little bit of love and togetherness. And that's the life of a ghetto child. No man shall judge me. Thank you. That's just a bit of insight, okay?
Thank you, Luke. That was brilliant. I've been meaning to introduce you to Tracy. Yeah. Penny, do you want to follow on from that? And then Tracy, are you going to follow on as well? She's going to the lead. Penny, come on.
So, my novel, Riding the High Road, is going to be launched in October of this year, so it's becoming increasingly exciting, although I've been waiting years and years for it to happen. So it's the story of an 18-year-old Gethin who's seeking his sperm donor father in the Scottish Highlands, where he's persuaded to join a young adoptee, Jez, on the back of her motorbike. In this scene, they meet Aidan and are roped into rescuing pilot whales trapped in the Kyle of Durness, which is at the top northwest corner of Scotland. And this is based on an actual incident where local people helped rescue whales in Durness in 2011. And as soon as I heard this story, I knew it had to be part of Jez and Gethin's adventures. And it also provides a trigger for Jez to release suppressed emotions about her birth parents, Ken and Alice. So we join them here, helping whales that are beached on the shoreline. It's told from Jez's point of view. We carry on working in silence. The faint slap of the sea, mournful cry of the gulls, distant whistling from the sound. That's their distress call, Stuart says, matter of fact. Jesus, this is more than I can take. Come on, girl, like the whales have any choice but to bear it. I scoop around my whale's head again. The great staring eye gives no clue if this is helping her. Decided it's a female, have I? Kidding myself, I'm connecting, right? Just shut the fuck up and carry on scooping. Ian comes across the beach to us. We're taking the boat out to help turn the whales. If you want to join Aidan and get kitted out with wetsuits in the van. I place my hand on the wet sheet above my whale's flipper. She blinks like she's responding. Jez? Gethin nods towards the boats. I keep my hand on the whale. Stuart pours water over her head, and I watch her shut her eye again. Come on, Jez. Gethin's face shines adventure. I'll be back, I whisper to the whale. The nearest whales are grounded on a submerged sandbank with others swimming around the bank. The guys from the military dinghies are wading waist deep, shouting instructions. The whale's eerie whistling pierces through. Jesus, Gethin whispers as we link rubberized arms. Ian explains that we need to get in and try to shift some of the whales. The tide's rising, and if they don't move, they will drown. Oh, freeze your boards off, Aidan shouts as the water hits crotch height. And he's right. The wetsuit isn't as much protection as you'd think. Strange pin-pricking as the cold seeps through. Legs like lead, just walking a few meters. One of the guys signals us to a whale lying on its side, water lapping halfway up his body. The guy holds a rolled up yellow mat that we need to get underneath the whale. He positions us to grab onto handles along one side. Then he starts to unravel the mat, dips down under the water to pull it along. His mate follows him at the other corner, and they emerge a few seconds later. Again, pull hard, the guy shouts. They dip down to come a bit farther along the whale's side. Just a minute. We grip the rope handles, and the guys heave, and suddenly the whale starts to turn with a shining black wall of flesh. Aidan shouts as the whale advances and splashes into the open water. Then he loses his balance and slides onto the surface, still gripping the mat. I can't frigging see him, just the flailing mat and the massive bulk of the half-submerged whale. Gethin looks around frantically, moves along to duck down under the mat. The guy lunges towards us as the ripples settle from where Gethin went under. I lean forward, straining to see beneath the water's surface. The whale shifts its shiny wall, and I hang on to the mat and steady my feet. Cold shiver in the small of my back. Time stands still as the guy approaches, face strained and anxious. Distant shouts from the other boats, pierce of the whale's whistle, smell of rotting fish and diesel. Bitter taste in my mouth mingles with the salt on my lips, stomach hollow with fear, forgetting to breathe. Suddenly the water parts and rolls off the hulk of Gethin, rasping for breath and hauling Aidan over his shoulder. Aidan splutters, face ghostly green, and the guy grabs him under the arms and drags him onto the boat with Ian. Gethin stands shivering next to me. For God's sake, I grab his arm. I thought we'd lost the pair of you. He looks at me open-mouthed, hair plastered to his face. A bit of seaweed hangs from his ear like some merman's jewellery. I squeeze his arm tight with the relief I feel. And now I'm just skipping to the end of the chapter where they join the boats guiding the surviving whales. It's a trip on the boat, herding the 20 or so whales out of the Kyle. I sit at the front, watching the sun glint on the black fins bobbing forward. Whales still wrestling their distress. We edge to the bend in the Kyle and the open sea, beckoning its creatures to safety. Gethin's in his element, gesticulating at the whales heading out. Even Aidan's lost his hard boy edge with his straight-line smile. Leaving me, arms held tight around my churning guts, wanting to howl out loud as I battle the flashing images of death. Alice's haunted face, Ken zipped in his body bag, Aidan's brother splattered under the lorry, and the whale I left stranded on the beach, those great eyes watching without hope.
Thank you, Penny. That was a good teaser for the book. Tracy, do you want to finish off? And then we'll have a break after that, and then we'll have Carmel. Oh, I'm so sorry, Andre. No, you do. You do. You come now, you're here, and then Andre next. Is that okay? Yeah. Sorry.
You shouldn't have said that, deleted it. Hiya everybody, my name's Tracy. I've just got 3 quick poems to do. I said to Bev I ain't got any, but I thought, God, I've got shitloads I ain't done yet. So Mum said I look smart and that I look the part. Yeah, right, the YPO kid. Braced with my new pencil case and pen, I was ready to learn. Mum said I should try my best and that was enough, but it turns out it wasn't. I was confused when the teacher said I had neat handwriting, but then would deface it with red pen. There would be threats of detention if I didn't pay attention, but I simply wasn't interested in what they had to say. I wanted to do woodwork, but apparently that wasn't for girls. Instead, I was sent to bake, but I didn't want to bake cakes. I had a lot of questions, but school didn't cover the topics I wanted to talk about. The teachers would give me homework, but I didn't see the point. More red lines. I would prefer the naughty bench rather than sit and learn French. Plus, I had no desire to travel to France. I mean, who in their right mind eats snails? I don't care for RE or history. It's all a mystery. Plus, I don't believe anything that we were being told. They said that all the kids were treated as equals, but not all the kids had to queue for a free school meal ticket. I knew I'd never make prefect because I was never perfect. Only the compliant sheep got that treat. If I went AWOL, I could be always found hiding in the loos, sharing the tools. I once got expelled because I rebelled, but they conceded and let me back. I was gutted. There was no time for daydreaming. You either paid attention or got detention. I loved sports, but I hated the part before and after. I tried to avoid the stairs while some girls proudly showed off their pubic hairs. To me, it was wrong. According to my teachers, my future rested on the outcome of my exams, but I didn't give a damn. School was for fools, and I learnt more from breaking the rules. I remember the last words that my head teacher said. "You'll answer nothing, Miss Ford," which I obviously ignored. And apart from my middle finger, I think which said it all, and despite what they said, I turned out okay. That's it. So I'm finishing this one off, but I do like it, so I'm going to share it with you. So don't be fooled by what you see. Truth is, some days you would not want to be me. You see, in between being fucking fantastic and occasionally sarcastic, there's a side to me that others rarely see. And some days it's hard to be me. Some days I feel like I've woken up on the wrong side of the bed until I realise that negative Nancy has been squatting overnight in my head. Sometimes she can be a relentless bitch, like an irritating itch that won't go away. She taunts me, she haunts me, making me question my self-worth. And at times her relentless chatter can get exhausting. There have been times when she's goaded me to give in, but my fear of failure motivates me to win. There are times when Nancy's claimed I would fail, but my faith stood strong and helped me to prevail. And the days when the days got a little rough, I've had to ignore her and remind myself that I am enough. And the days when she's left me feeling depressed, I've had to remind myself how much I am blessed. There have many been a time when she's tried to drag me down, but I've stood up and adjusted my crown and said, "Fuck you, bitch." I'm still learning to recognise the signs when Nancy's trying to creep back in my head, and I'm still learning to still learning to ignore all the negative things she said. But I've realised there's no such thing as wrong side of the bed. Just make sure negative Nancy hasn't been residing in your head. And if she is, evict her ass. And this is the last one. So what's your story? I used to let others write my story, but now I write my own. I'm a work of non-fiction filled with conviction. The main protagonist, I've fought off many antagonists. I've played various roles, including the hero, villain, and victim, but now I prefer to play myself. Authentic to the core, there are parts of me, my story, that are still raw, but that's okay. There are parts of my story I could choose to erase, but instead I've chosen to leave them on the page because it's my story. My story has already thousands of chapters, and there are still words that still cause me pain, but I remind myself that they are just words. My story is still work in progress, and there's still so much more to be written. And there's a moral to my story, and it is that shit happens. It's what you do with the shit that counts. What's your story? That's it.
Thank you, Tracy. You're taking us back to the shoveling of the dog poo, I think there. Sorry, Andre, would you finish off for us?
All right. I published my first novel last year, and when I was writing my first novel, I think like a lot of writers who are writing their first book, I wanted to put everything in it, and I wanted lots of things to happen. And I'm working on another novel now, and I've sort of been thinking, well, what if nothing happens? What if there's no real characters in it? What if there's no action? What if there's no drama? This, I'm told, is not a great way to sell books, but the first one didn't sell all that well either, so Nothing to lose. I'd started living as a hermit long before the pandemic began. Hermit might seem like an elevated word here, but I'm using it intentionally. I'm using all of these words intentionally. There's nothing unintentional in this book. If you come across a word or phrase that feels wrong and you wince on my behalf, be assured it's not a problem with the prose. It's a problem with you, the reader, not being tuned to the right frequency. You can't hear the music, but trust me, it's there, pulsing out on the radio waves. To the reader who understands the movement of the spheres, the divine order that governs the eons and their emanation from the one that is their source, my meaning will be clear. When I say I'd started to live as a hermit, I mean it. I mean it in all the ways it can be meant. I've set about writing this down because I want to leave a record of those cold, pure days when the ghost came back into my life. Ideally, I would like to record this in a way that involves little in the way of vulgar detail. I would like it to be a story about the structure of the soul, the darkness of the intellect, the obstinacy of the will, the four last things, and other such esoteric matters. But as I have still only just begun groping my way up from the bog of material life, to tell this story, I must dwell for a time in the lower spheres, the spheres defined by agitation and stasis and the organic. It is in these spheres that the word body attains gravity and becomes this body, the organism I inhabit and resent, which inhabits and resents a basement unit in an old apartment building in a city by the shore of a lake on a continent that still sometimes absurdly calls itself the New World. I spent the first part of my life asleep. I awoke for a brief period when I met the ghost, but before he came a ghost, and then fell asleep again. In that second long sleep, I had a number of fantastical dreams. I only stopped dreaming, to the extent that I have stopped dreaming, when I became a hermit. In the first of these dreams, I was a man who traveled to a large city to find a job. Because I was a university-educated logorrheic, open to the world, unburdened by illusions, and willing to do my part for capitalism, finding a job was not all that difficult. It was not an amazing job, as jobs go, but it carried some degree of power, and crucially, the promise of more power. I was very interested in power at that time. I'd grown up among people who talked about it in very abstract terms. These people imagined that they had very little power, and so it seemed to me that there was a truth in having power, a secret knowledge that could explain why things were the way that they were. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Andre. I'd forgotten where we were then. I was just listening to the story. I have cocked up slightly with the time tonight because it was so kind of relaxed, and then gradually, and I thought there were less people, and then there were more people. So I want to make sure we've got plenty of time for Carmel. So we could go straight through, or we could have like a very quick 5-minute break. I'll give you a very quick 5-minute break, but I want to make sure we've got time to linger with Carmel's wonderful story. So if you can be as quick as you can if you're getting another drink. Right, so take your seats. I'm going to try and take this seat. Which feels complicated. Why are you laughing at me, Penny? What am I doing? Just wondering if I'm late. I'm all right. I'm all all right. Okay, I'm very excited today to have Carmel with us. This is Carmel Page.
Hello.
Carmel is best known, I think, as an oral storyteller, but she is also an author. She has 2 books down here, Yorkshire Fairy Tales for Children. I'm going to ask her some questions and she can fill these gaps in a minute. And also the story of the Wantley Dragon, which is an area of Sheffield again. Carmel can fill in the gaps. What I want to tell you is that Carmel contacted me and said, I want to write a book to go with this event that I'm doing in Stannington or wherever it is, about the Wantley Dragon. How long do you think I could do it in 6 weeks? And I was like, Yeah, probably. Because that's the kind of thing I say to people. And she did.
I believed her. 6 weeks!
She wrote the thing, drew all of the pictures, and self-published a book in 6 weeks. So people know Carmel as a storyteller. I think she's more like a magician, really. I mean, I've never heard of anyone doing anything quite so ridiculous. So she's...
You told me!
She's an absolute wonder. And I wanted to ask you, Carmel, because I've always been intrigued by storytelling. Like, I don't quite get it. So what is the difference between being a writer and a storyteller? And is it the same? Like, do you put the words on a page and then learn to tell them? Or does it evolve in a different way? That's my main question.
Okay, so whether you're writing in your head or on paper, you're thinking about your audience, yeah? Unless, like, you're writing your shopping list, you're thinking about your cupboard. So, as I'm writing, I'm thinking about the person who's going to read the story. And I tend to actually type out the stories that I'm going to tell. Because once I've got them on paper, I feel like they're safe and I own them. But once I start to tell them, they change completely. So it's a bit like, you know, the thing about the guy who caught the fish, you know, and every time it gets a bit bigger. Every time I tell the stories, they change. But a lot of that is because I look at the audience as I'm telling, and I don't rehearse very much nowadays. I just check I know the plot, because when I look at the audience, you tell me how to tell the story.
So I don't know if I'm the only person who's sitting there going, you think about the audience when you're writing. Like,
Shall I give you an example?
No.
Do you not do that? Let me give you an example.
I just write what the heck I want to write and hope that one day somebody might want to read it.
Okay.
And then, to be honest, like, I published a book and someone said they were reading it, and I went, oh my God, don't read it. Like I don't think I ever think I want someone to read what I've written. I just like writing. So.
Let me give you an example. I was telling the story of the birth of Vulcan. Okay, so this baby is born, and the midwife takes Vulcan in her arms and goes, oh, he's beautiful. She passes the baby to the father. He looks at his son for the first time. Oh, he's beautiful. He passes the baby to the mother. She looks at the son. He is ugly, I'm not having him. And she threw him off Mount Olympus, and he went up, 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 up in the air all afternoon. He went up, up, up in the air. And round about tea time, he just hovered for a moment like a kestrel. And then he started to come down, 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 down. And at that moment, I looked at the audience, and I saw a mum with a newborn baby breastfeeding. And I thought, I can't believe what I'm doing. This is so inappropriate. And I looked at that mum and I said, if you've got a baby, don't try this at home. And everybody cracked up. And I realized that actually that is, like, it was the first time I told the story, and I realized there's a huge amount of tension. I mean, that's child abuse, isn't it? Throwing out this child. And I realized I actually needed to break the tension with some humor. And it was the mum in the audience who taught me how to tell the birth of Vulcan.
Amazing. So as a writer, I usually ask people, like, what got them started writing. Did you begin... How did you know you wanted to be a storyteller? But did you, which came first? The writing of stories or the telling of stories, or how did you get into that world?
Well, what came first was going to school and being told I was rubbish because I'm dyslexic. So obviously, I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but because I'm dyslexic and I went to school, basically if you go to school, you can't be a writer because all schools do is like tell you that you can't write and all the things you're doing wrong. So I trained in childcare. When mine were little, I retrained in the arts, so I was then doing visual art projects in schools. All this time I was writing stories just for the joy of writing, and then one day a head teacher got in touch and said, we need a storyteller for the last day of term. I can't find anybody. Do you know anybody? Or I think you could do it. I mean, this was a school where I'd been like created Carmel, and I used to go in like a sequin tunic and indecently tight silver leggings and fly around the classroom before I started the day work. And she was like, I think you could do storytelling, you know? And I was like, I think I could. So I spent a day in the school storytelling, and I just went, that's my thing! This is it! I found it. I'm going to spend the rest of my life being a storyteller. But I still write as well, so I'm kind of doing both.
And did you train in any way? Because one of the things we wanted to mention is that Carmel is running some storytelling workshops, one on the 22nd of July, and I hope there's a few spaces left on that, and then she's hoping to do some more. And the other thing Carmel's been doing is sort of training people in how to present themselves, because whether we're writing on the page or telling stories, I think we all need help with how do we get that connection with the audience. And you can feel that, you know, when we do events like this, that some words hit you more clearly than others depending on how people are presenting themselves. Did you go on a storytelling course yourself, or have you just learned on the job? And I think that's fine to learn on the job.
Is it?
Yeah.
Because when people ask me about writing, I'm like, look, you really have to work hard, and you have to go on courses, and you have to read books about how to do it. And the truth is, I just discovered I could tell stories. But I went to, so there's a storytelling club in Sheffield called the Story Forge. There's some flyers on the tables, which a fabulous guy called Tim Rouse used to run, but I now run it with a couple of friends. And I went to the storytelling club and told stories, but I listened to stories. And some people told fantastic stories, and some people did not tell very good stories. And I just thought, what is the difference between the person who's telling the story that I am absolutely enchanted by and the person who just isn't capturing me? So I just tried to unpick what it was that made me listen to stories.
Have you got any tips? What do you think that is?
Look at your audience. But my biggest tip is look at your audience, because when you are writing, I mean, maybe you're not thinking about your audience, but when I'm writing, I'm thinking about an audience, but I can't see them. And I'm thinking what will interest them, what will keep their attention, what will excite them, what will frighten them, what will make them laugh. I can see you. Like, I'm looking at you now, and I can see, oh, they're all looking at me apart from the naughty ones at the back. The naughty ones at the back never look at you, so that's okay. So if you look at your audience, you can see if they're listening. And that's why as time goes on, I rehearse less, because I just know, if I've rehearsed it and I know exactly how to do it, then actually, if the audience isn't enjoying it, I'll probably just carry on doing it, even though they've had enough and they want me to shut up so they can go home. But if I can see whether or not they're engaging with it, I can make sure it's the right performance for them.
Fascinating. I think there's a lot we could all learn. But I am, again, conscious of time. So I think rather than asking you more questions, we'd just like to hear a story. And Carmel's books are on sale. So do have a look at the end. I'm going to get off my stool and I'm going to let you do your magic.
Thank you.
Carmel.
So I'm going to tell you the story of the woman who stuck her neck out. Once there was a man, a big man with a big head and a short, fat neck that made it hard for him to look from side to side. But he didn't need to. His life was sorted out. He knew where he was going. He had 1,000 goats. He had 3,000 sheep. He had enough herdsmen to do his work that he never had to do anything himself. So he sat in a chair, watching through his window. He had a big house on the hill, and on the hills opposite, he watched the men looking after his flocks. Now, one day, he was in the market. he was attending to the buying and selling of flocks. And a beautiful young woman walked past, and she turned his head. And he said, I'm going to marry her. And in those days, in that place, if you were the big man who lived in the big house on the hill, you could say that, and you got your way. And that woman, she wouldn't have had a choice. And so this young woman called Abigail went to live in the big house up on the hill with an old man called Nabal. Now, when Abigail got there, she looked about her. She saw how the household was run. She could see what needed to be done. And she went to talk to Nabal. And he said, I didn't marry you for you tell me how to run my house. He sat in his chair. He looked through the window. On the hill opposite, the herdsman looked after his flocks. That was his life sorted. He did not need a woman telling him what to do. And one day as he looked out, he saw a great horde of men come across and settle in a camp on the hill opposite. And he was not happy. And he called his herdsman to him and he said, find out who that is who's camped over there and tell me everything they say and everything they do. And he sat and he watched. So the following evening, the herdsmen came and they said, my lord Nabal, the man up there, he is called David. He is a warrior. He has 600 warriors with him. But they are kind to us. They are not causing any trouble. They actually help us, looking after our flocks. I don't trust them. Keep watching. And every day the herdsman came and reported that David and his men not only were not causing a problem, but they were helping. He wasn't happy. You see, it was the tradition in that time and place that you provide food for other people who were on your land. And Nabal looked at this man, 600 warriors. He was not going to take on responsibility for feeding them. He thought, I will not go out. I will ignore him and he'll go away. On the other hill, on the other side of the valley, David is looking across at Nabal's house. David has 600 warriors, 600 mouths, 600 bellies, and the food is running low. And he knows that Nabal should invite them all for a meal, and no invitation comes, even though he has helped his herdsmen. And so he sends messengers down from the hill where they are camping into the valley and up to Nabal's house. Nabal's staff tell him that messengers have come to speak to him. Who are you? What do you want? Please, Lord Nabal, our Lord David has sent us to say that he is encamped with many men and he would appreciate if you could send a gift of food. Who is this David? I have never heard of him. And as for you, many people are leaving their masters these days and wandering about the countryside on their own. I know not who you are. Go away. And so they went down into the valley and up to the hill. And they told David what Nabal had said to them. And he was so angry. Get my sword and get 400 warriors and arm them. We will march on Nabal, and I will not rest till every single man in his household is dead. Fortunately, Nabal's shepherds had done as he asked them. They had stayed close to David to find out what was going on, to listen to everything he did. And one of them, hearing what David had said, ran down from the hill where David was into the valley up to Nabal's house, and he went straight to Abigail. Please, there's something's happened. You need to know. And Abigail put down what she was doing and she turned to look. What is it? What's the matter? Nabal has refused to give food to David. He is coming now with 400 warriors. He says he will slay every single man in Nabal's household. And Abigail says, quick, into the storeroom. Get the bread, get the flour, get the wine. Get the raisins, get donkeys, load them all up with the food and send them down into the valley to meet David as he comes. And get one more donkey and saddle it for me. When you're wearing a dress, you cannot sit on a donkey facing forward. Abigail had to sit side saddle on her donkey, but she did not look sideways. She turned her head to look where she was going. And there, coming down the opposite hill, were 400 warriors. The sun was glinting off their armor, off their swords. The ground was going stomp, 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 shaking with their feet as they marched down that hill. The air smelt of violence. And Abigail carried on into the valley. Now David, he was coming down the other hill, and he saw all of these donkeys coming towards him. What trick is this, he said. And then, on the last donkey, a beautiful young woman, and she alighted from the donkey, and he stopped, for their way was full of donkeys. And that young woman came, and she lay on the ground at his feet, and she said, please accept this gift of food. For my husband Nabal, he is a fool. Please do not fight, and if you decide today not to fight, you will be blessed. David stood there, warriors behind him, ready to fight, psyched up for battle. The valley in front of him, full of donkeys. And there, at his feet, one woman blocking his path. No weapon, no armor. He was completely humbled, and he said to his warriors, take the donkeys back to camp. And he said to that young woman, arise up, because I would have had a fight today over food. I would have committed a great sin today if you had not stopped me. Arise up and go in peace. And he walked back to his camp. And Abigail walked home, but she did not go home in peace, for she had to tell her husband what she had done. So she went straight to the house and looked about her to see where her husband was. And he was in the banqueting room. He decided to celebrate his great decision not to share food by having a banquet himself. And he was very drunk. And she realized it was not the right time to talk to him. She slept badly. And the next morning, she got up and she went straight to Nabal. And she told him that she had given away his bread and his flour and his grapes and his wine. "You did what? You did what?" And he was in such a rage. He shook with such fury that he collapsed on the floor speechless. His staff had to come and lift him up and place him on his bed. And for 10 days, he lay there diseased with anger. And on the 10th day, he died. Across the valley, on the other hill, David heard that Nabal was dead. And he thought about Abigail, a young woman who was now widowed and vulnerable, a woman who had been brave and generous and beautiful. And so he sent messengers a second time from his hill into the valley up to Nabal's house. And this time they said, "David would like to marry you. Will you marry him?" And for a second time, Abigail called for donkeys. She had them loaded up with all her belongings. Her handmaids went with her. She adorned herself in her best dress. And again, she rode a donkey into the valley. But because she was wearing a dress, she could not sit facing forward. She sat on that donkey sideways, but she turned and she looked where she was going. And there, coming down the hill on the other side, was David, not coming as a warrior in battle, in anger, but coming as a bridegroom in love. And David looked, and he saw Abigail coming to meet him. And I wonder what he thought. I hope he realized that there was a woman who had said that if he didn't fight, he would be blessed. And I think he was blessed because he had a wife who was beautiful and brave and generous, and when people's lives were at risk, she was prepared to stick her neck out. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmel. We need to end, but I just want to ask you very quickly, is it a biblical story, or is it?
It is actually, yeah.
And do you usually work with a story that's already been written, or do you sometimes make up your own? Or
Oh, I make them up as I go along.
Yeah.
So I use a lot of folk tales and legends, myths, biblical stories, but the schools just said, we're really struggling to teach children about rocks and soil. Can you make it exciting? So I've made up stories about rocks and soil that excite 7-year-olds. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Do have a chat with Carmel. Do come and look at the books. Do come and marvel at the book that was written, illustrated, and published in 6 weeks. In 6 weeks. This is without knowing anything about the self-publishing process or how to use Amazon, or she did it all.
Never doing it again.
Thank you. This is the last Sounds About Right of the summer term, so certainly for myself, I'm off for the next 6 weeks or so, and there will be a few bits and bobs happening in the Writers' Workshop over the summer, but a lot more coming back in the autumn, so keep an eye on websites, newsletters, etc. And thank you everybody who's here, who's supported us in our venture this year. It's been a wonderful experiment that seems to be working. So. Thanks everybody, and thank you David for making the sound work and for filming us. And once more, thanks to all our open micers, and thank you, Carmel.